Hey Fern, it's Nicola. How are you today?
I'm good, and you?
I am doing good. I am glad to see Friday finally roll around.
I know, isn't that nice?
It is. I've had a rough week at my regular job. I'm always glad to see the weekend roll around, although I don't know why, because I think I actually pull more hours with the writing and the podcast than I do at my regular job.
But this is a lot more fun, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's your passion. So when it's your passion, you don't feel the drag as much.
Exactly. My mom will periodically come in, and I'll be sitting here at my computer frantically typing, and she's like, why do you keep doing this? Are you making any money? I'm like, well, it's not about money. That's why I have a regular job. I like doing this. And she just shakes her head like, I don't understand, but it's very much a passion. And you have to have passion to keep doing it.
Oh, yes. I mean, and my mom does the same thing, because when I started Inklings Publishing, she was like, you're going to lose all your money. You know, there's no way. And I was like, but this is my love, you know. So it doesn't matter. Like you said, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're making money or not. What matters is that you're getting the words out there and you're helping authors.
Absolutely. And I don't believe I would trade this for anything. It's just definitely, for me, it's not about money, but I think that kind of goes with every passionate job that you go into. If you go into it thinking I'm going to make money off of this, you're kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. And if it pans out and you do well at it, then that's just kind of like the frosting on the cake for me.
Yes, agree.
All right, well, how about we go ahead and get started, and tell us a little bit about Inklings Publishing.
Well, Inklings Publishing began in 2013. It was really born from a writer's retreat. Myself and several other writers had gone away to a lake house, and while we were there, we just had this explosion of creativity. We came up with all these amazing stories. And when we returned, I had just read a book by Pamela Fagan Hutchins on, what kind of what kind of loser does indie publish, and how can I be one too? And it was really a how-to manual to self-publish. And I thought, well, I could really do this. So I, spoke with the people that had been at the retreat, and I was like, why don't we publish these stories? Try to sell these anthologies, make some money so that we can also keep having retreats and things. And that's kind of where it was born. And from there, it's grown to expanding beyond just anthologies of multiple authors. But we actually now have 4 authors besides myself that we publish.
Awesome. So are y'all just a small press, or are you more of a hybrid publisher?
We're a small press. I prefer to do a traditional publishing model. So that's why we just really have a very small number of authors that we work with. When we publish a book, we fund it fully, so the author does not have to put any money up. We do offer the author the opportunity to purchase their book at 50% off, and they can resell it at full price and make some money themselves. So because, a lot of times authors have opportunities to be, at this event or another event. So that gives them a little bit of an opportunity to make money too. But we don't charge the authors for any of the services. So it's really a traditional publisher, but it's very small press, yes.
Awesome. So are y'all open for submissions, or was this something that y'all just kind of wanted to keep small, just, a certain group of authors that got together, or y'all actually take unsolicited manuscripts from time to time?
We actually have an open submission policy. We use the platform authors.me. It's a really great platform. Basically, when you go on our website, and you click their button, it guides you through a whole series of questions where you fill in about the work that you're submitting, and you fill in about yourself, give us idea of your background and also what kind of author platform you have. And then, of course, you submit the document itself. And right now what we're trying to do is fill in the genres we don't have. So, like, currently I have a legal thriller author who is writing his second novel in a series. I have a really great kind of a horror suspense thriller author. We have a romance author. So we're trying to kind of fill in the other genres that we don't already have so that we can offer a full range of books.
And that was going to be my next question, was what type of genres do you publish, and are you open to, I know erotica is really huge now and has been for several years thanks to 50 Shades, so is that something that you are willing to publish at any point in time, or are you just kind of just sticking to more of a contemporary romance?
We have one erotica compilation, which is an anthology, Eclectically Carnal, and we have a romance author, and Andrea is kind of a not as high heat, but she's got a really nice, kind of contemporary romance going. We are interested in erotica. We will consider it. We definitely feel that that's a genre that, people are interested in. So, of course, we'd be happy to publish. And just in general, any kind of, like, historic romances, we don't have any of that. So we would love anything kind of with a historic feel to it, or paranormal romances. That's really kind of a big one right now. A lot of people are kind of getting into the paranormal romance area.
That's been one of my specialties, is the paranormal. I won't necessarily say romance. It depends on what series of mine that you pick up. Some of it is really more action adventure, and romance kind of takes a back seat. And there are some that we've, one series that we did that was it's paranormal romantic comedy, but it's very erotic, and it was kind of tongue-in-cheek when we wrote them. We wrote them with the intent of some of it being over the top, almost cheesy. Okay, not almost. Some of it is definitely cheesy, but we had a lot of fun with them. We laughed a lot, just really enjoyed it. We've still got 2 more books left in the series to write, but we've really enjoyed writing the Sweet Seduction series. So I kind of like reading the ones that that doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yes, I think definitely humor is something we sort of need right now, just to get us off of so many serious things going on in our world. And so if something is funny or cheesy or just makes you feel good, I think that helps people. I think reading, as an avid reader, I mean, it's a way to just kind of get away from the reality of the world, to just relax your mind, and so it's really, we do not necessarily look for, like, literary fiction, like very highbrow. We're really more into, like, commercial. We want our books, of course, to be meaningful, but more than anything, we want them to be fun. We want people to enjoy the read and be entertained, and of course, if it makes you think or if you connect to it in some way, that's great, but reading should be something really enjoyable, and something that relaxes you.
Absolutely. I've always been an avid reader. Mine started off with a love affair with Dr. Seuss when I was in first grade, and it just kind of bloomed from there. But it's always been a great passion of mine. I love to read, and I would rather sit down with a good book than I had to go and watch a movie. I love reading. I love escaping into these worlds. And for me, the visualization that I get inside my own head just works out so much better than what you can feasibly pull off on the big screen. So I've always loved reading more so than actually watching a movie or a TV series.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. And generally speaking, any time that they take a book that you've read and enjoyed and turn it into a movie, it's always kind of disappointing because something in your mind was so vivid and you just saw it, and now they've represented it, and it never quite matches what you had in your mind. It's very rare for a movie to represent a book well. I think Game of Thrones maybe it's kind of close in that it kind of is depicting, or it was, because they kind of strayed away from the books, but it depicts the world well. But even then, when you read the books, you get so much more because you get the actual feelings of the characters, which you don't really. The actors kind of convey them, but when you read, the author is showing them to you, their internal thoughts and feelings, and so that adds a richness that you just cannot capture on the screen.
Absolutely. That internal dialogue that's kind of going on in a character's mind is not something that you really get when you go to the big screen or a TV series. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And there's a lot of nuances that you pick up on when you're reading that doesn't necessarily, that as a reader you may have thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's not something that they really put over into the big screen. I know with the Twilight books and the movies, they got a little bit further away from the storyline the further into the movies that you got. But one of the things that always stuck out at me with Break You Dawn Part 2 is in reading that, the first thing that Bella realized once she became a vampire was that she was no longer pregnant. Her first concern was, where's my baby? What's going on? And as a mom, I immediately picked up on that. But when they did the movie, like the first thing that she was concerned with in the movie was, seeing Edward. And like the baby was kind of an afterthought. And I found that incredibly disappointing as a mom, because to me that was something that was very pivotal to the storyline, later on when she first, actually gets to see Renesmee. And I remember in the book it was talking about that she was thinking she didn't smell like food at all. She smelled like she was supposed to. She didn't think of her as, like a human that was something tasty to eat. And they just completely blew over that in the movies. And to me, that was something that was very powerful that they just completely left out.
Yes. Yes, and because as authors, when we're crafting our books, you are working very hard to make your characters as lifelike as possible. And if you're a mother, and no matter what has happened to you, your very first thought when you come to is your child. That's just human nature. That's just the nature of mom. So when they took that away from the movie, yes, it lost a lot. And I think that several movies do that. For example, the James Bond films, they're really fun to watch, but when you read the original books, you discover so much more to Bond than this like superhero spy. He is very human. He is scared. There are situations he gets into that he doesn't know what to do, and he's frightened. And that humanness is lost on the big screen, because on the big screen he's just this like amazing action hero, And so I really feel that a book is going to give you a lot more just on the humanness of the characters. Just being able to connect to them like you connected with her on a mother's basis, And I think that's what we do as readers. We connect with the characters because they seem like us. They are like humans, and so we see ourselves in them.
Absolutely. And I know especially for me, and I believe this holds true for most writers, our characters become very real to us. So whenever, something that I've imagined in my mind and that I've wrote several, books around these characters, and someone else can connect with them on the same level that I have, for me as a writer, it's great that they like the book, but just knowing that these characters have become just as real to my readers as what they are to me. It's just absolutely phenomenal as a writer.
Oh, yes. And they take on, like you say, a life of their own. I have had situations where I'm sitting down and writing, and I have a whole intention of where I think the scene will go, and they just sort of take over, and
Absolutely.
it ends up being completely different, and that's just beautiful, because it becomes something very real. Those characters become they're not like two-dimensional. They're nuanced. They're human beings, and they're interacting in this world you created. And it's a really, sometimes when you say it to non-author people, they look at you a little odd, but it's very, they become very real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd made the comment to my mother one time that she had asked me, well, how are you doing on this next book that you're supposed to be writing? I'm like, this character's not talking to me yet. He's being quiet, so I'm going to have to wait, and we were with a table full of people, and they all kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, what? I'm a writer. My characters talk to me. They're very real for me. But,
Yes.
Absolutely. People that don't write, and I tell them, I said, the only way that I can explain it to you is it's like having and not to make light of anyone that has this, but for me, it's like having a multiple personality disorder, being very aware of all the personalities and still being sane.
Yes, yes, it is because they become very real, and they take part in their world. And I remember when I was starting my first book, a very good friend of mine was like, well, it would be fun if you told the story from the three gentlemen's perspective and not hers, because then you see her through these three gentlemen's perspective. And I thought, oh, well, that would be kind of fun. And then, of course, I'm sitting there trying to think of and kind of channel one of the gentlemen, and he just wouldn't speak to me. It was not going to happen. And but she was trying to tell me her story, So I said, no, this is her story. This is not their story, and she wants to tell it herself. And you tell people these things, and they do look at you funny, but it's the reality of what we are. We're artists, we're creators, and we do channel these personalities, that flow into our writing.
Absolutely. One of my favorite writing memes is something, it goes something like, writer's block is when your imaginary friends stop talking to you. And that's pretty much it. That is perfect analogy of what it's like to have writer's block. Is it is when, none of your characters want to talk to you and, want to tell your story. And it can be both a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes the little suckers will not hush, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you've got to get up in 3 hours to go to work, and somebody decides that is when they want you to sit down and write 10,000 words of their story.
Yes.
You gotta love them.
Yes. And you're like, I can't right now.
Yes, and I don't know what it is about the characters, but they always want to pick the most inopportune moments to decide that's when they want to start talking and tell you stuff, and luckily a lot of what I do at work I kind of do on autopilot, but I'm sitting here typing up an email in the back of my head, I've got this character going, hey, wouldn't it be great if I did this when you got home, and this is like 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you realize I still have 8.5 hours before I get home. So
yes.
It's not,
yes.
It can be good and bad.
Well, one of the things that I like to do, and I have a lot of writer's notebooks, and most of them are like composition books or really nice little journals. But I have started carrying with me a small, kind of like a little notepad, the kind that you used to write your homework assignments in, when you were a kid. And I just carry it with me because sometimes you're just in a place where that if you don't write down that idea, it's going to disappear.
Absolutely.
But you can't sit and write it. So I'll pull out the little notepad and just make a note to myself of, okay, this is what I'm thinking, something that'll jog that idea back to me, when I have time, because otherwise sometimes you do lose those moments where, later down the road when you sit down in front of your computer, that idea is gone and it's not coming back, So I've taken to doing that.
Absolutely, and I do the same thing at work. I'll grab a piece of paper, a notepad or something, and I'll jot something down, and all throughout the day, or I'm real bad about emailing myself. From work, I'll email myself something that I need to do or an idea that I had, or I'll jot down something on a notepad and put it in my purse at the end of the day, or like I said, I'll email it to myself, and I'll get home and open up my emails, and I have all of these emails that I've emailed myself. I'm like, okay, let's transfer all of this over into OneNote so that I don't forget it.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's a really great idea, especially if you're working in an office and you have access, you can just do a quick note to yourself on the email.
Yeah, and I do that a lot. I try to, do one email. I'll open up an email, and I'll do all these bullet points and jot down all these ideas and stuff. And at the end of the day, because I'd gotten to the point where I was emailing myself so many different things till it was getting overwhelming. So I got to the point where I would open up one email, when I decided I had an idea, and I'd open up one, and throughout the day I'd just jot down stuff in that email, and at the end of the day I'd send it to myself.
Yes.
That helped clear that up so I didn't come in and have 12 or 15 emails for myself.
Yes. We find these little strategies as authors for making it happen in the hustle and bustle of real life. Because, as when we started talking, most authors, we're not living off of our work. Most authors, we have full-time jobs, sometimes more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're finding little strategies, little places where you can fit in your writing practice, and it's important to feed it. One of the things that I've noticed, working with authors is sometimes life will get in the way. They will tell me something like, well, I'll get that chapter to you, Fern, but first I've got to finish blah, blah, this for my work.
Mm-hmm.
No, you have to make a daily practice. Somewhere along your day you need to sit and write. When you're a writer, you need to really be writing every day. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be super productive every single time you do that, but, make time for it. And one of my developmental editors, he says, his name's Max Regan. He's a great writing coach and editor. And he says, you have to make time, and that means saying no to something else. And it's true. Sometimes you have to decide, okay, well, I mean, obviously you have to work, but, there may be some other little things that you can say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit and write. And negotiating the relationships in your life, with your family, because so many of us on top of work, we're full-time moms and wives and, working. It's hard, but if you need that support to be able to say to your family, you know what, I need this half hour, I need this hour, I'm going to go write, but it can be very challenging to find the places in life where you can write.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of authors, that's the main struggle that we have is, we've only got 24 hours in a day, and because we've got families and husbands and we work, it's just extremely difficult for a lot of us to find that time. And I struggle with feelings of that I'm, kind of ignoring my family, or I'm kind of shoving them off to the side or whatever. And I keep having to remind myself, well, if I wasn't sitting at my desk, what would I be doing? And it's usually, well, I would be in, my bedroom watching TV, and then, the kids would be in their bedroom watching TV. So I don't feel quite as guilty about, sitting at my desk and writing versus, watching TV, because either way, they're older, they're doing their own things. But it is something that I think a lot of authors struggle with, is just finding that time. And like you said, if it's nothing but a half hour a day, it's very difficult to juggle the work and the family and writing. And, most of us are indie authors, and that's, promoting and marketing and doing business strategy and all these other things that go in with just being an independent author. And for me, I'm not just, writing, but I'm also, running a couple of different blogs, a couple of different websites, several newsletters. I do graphic art and book formatting on the side, plus I'm doing my podcast. So when you throw all of this into the mix, and a lot of authors are wearing multiple hats just like me, it gets very overwhelming at times.
Yes. And one of the secrets that I have found is that we tend to think that all these other elements, like your blog, the podcast, the Facebook, of course, some of the Facebook is a waste of time because you're just goofing around in there. But, when you're purposely promoting yourself as an author and posting, to build your audience, we have a tendency to look at that as not being how can I say it? Not being part of our writing practice as though it's something external, but it's actually an integral part of being a writer. So, sometimes maybe that hour might not be necessarily sitting down and writing on a novel, but maybe it's sitting down and writing your blog. I think that authors would benefit from just giving themselves a little bit of mercy, if you will, of, okay, right now I'm doing this blog, but that's part of being a writer. Mm-hmm. Right now I'm putting together my Facebook posts and I'm scheduling them so that they'll post. That's part of being a writer. So I've started to kind of expand and not try to be so harsh on myself that, okay, so today I didn't actually write on my novel, but I wrote my blog or I wrote my Facebook posts, and that's part of that time frame. And I think if you give yourself a little bit of that, but balancing it so that you're not every day just doing that, so that you are making sure that at least, a certain number of days a week you are writing out new words or you're editing and revising, then you don't feel so stressed out trying to balance so many elements.
Absolutely. And I kind of think of it as I don't want to push myself. There's some times that, it's almost like writer's block. I'm just not in the mood to write. I sit in front of my computer screen and I'm just blank. I'm sitting there staring at it, and I could spend an hour staring at a blank screen, racking my brain. I might get 100 words in and end up erasing all of them the next day. Or I could spend that hour and do something that I consider fun, such as making book covers, or doing a book teaser, or writing a blog post, or spending time working on my podcast, because that is still part of my brand. It's maybe not necessarily a book or getting a new book out there, but it is part of the brand that I have built up as an author, because I do have multiple blogs, and that is all part of the marketing and promotion that goes along with it. Because if I can't snag someone with my writing, then maybe they find me through my blog, or maybe they find me through my podcast, and that may lead to them becoming a reader and a fan on down the road.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's very healthy to look at it that way. Instead of sitting there frustrated that the words are not coming, you are making that time and expanding it from just your actual writing, let's say, to your writing practice and your writing career. And that frees you up to be able to be more fluid. And I think, in a way, because you are doing these other elements, you do end up channeling more of your book and more of your writing, because you become very aware of, okay, I've already posted this and I've posted that, and I need to really get on this so that I can meet that time frame for publishing it. Because, as authors, we know that our fans, they expect your books to come out within a certain amount of time. They want new material. Mm-hmm. And so to keep building that momentum, you do have to be kind of on a schedule. So I think that by giving yourself a little mercy, a little bit of letting that be more fluid, you do end up being successful in getting your books out in in a good time frame and keeping your fans, and you just never know where your fans are going to come from, you know. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've had some authors that, you know, have submitted to us, and you know, they don't want to do Facebook, and they don't want to do Twitter, they don't want to do a blog, they don't want, you know, they don't want to brand, they don't want to do all these elements. And, you know, that is something that as a company we do weigh, because the reality is that, you know, you as an author, you need to put yourself out there, and you need to help bring in readers for your book. You know, as a publisher, we do what we can, but nobody can sell your book the way you can, you know.
Absolutely. I think for me as an author, it's all about being productive. And I think a lot of writers are kind of in that mindset that the only way that they see themselves as being productive is if they are actively writing on a book. But there are so many different elements and so many authors that have that wear the different hats and have, you know, other things that they do in addition to writing. That, you know, they have to look at that as still being productive. And, you know, that was kind of my point with, well, if I'm not being productive at writing on my novel because I'm kind of stuck, then I don't want to waste that time. I can be productive doing something else, whether that be the blog or a book teaser or, you know, posting to social media or, you know, doing some type of marketing plan or the podcast or what have you. So I think writers have kind of got to get out of that mindset that as to what they think of being productive is. It may not necessarily just be writing the novel, that there's more to being productive than just sitting and writing. There's lots of different elements that go with it.
Yes. And the reality is, you know, as the industry has become really a lot more pro-author, because as an author, you actually now have a lot of input, and you have also a lot more control over how you're branded, you know, and because you're doing it yourself. You know, the Houston Writers Guild is one of the many hats that I wear, and they do a conference called Indie Palooza in September, and it's primarily for indie authors, but the big focus is on marketing, promoting, building platform, gaining readership, and the reality is that is for everybody. You know, whether you're traditionally published by a big company or a small company, medium-sized, or you publishing yourself, you need to be very active in that arena of marketing and branding and doing those kinds of very proactive strategies, because, you know, really nobody's going to do it for you.
Absolutely. And I think what I've come across is a lot of authors that are just coming into the game have this almost like a disillusion that they think, well, if I get trade published, then I don't have to do anything but write. I don't have to market. I don't have to promote. I don't have to build a brand. I don't have to build a platform. I don't have to do any of that. I just sit and write. And even if you are trade published, that's not the reality of what it's like to be published. I've got several friends on my friends list on Facebook that have signed major book deals with Random House, but they're out there marketing and promoting right along, you know, the little guy over here that's independently publishing, because until they become a bestseller, not even Random House is willing to put forth any real time, energy, and money into them other than producing the book. The vast majority of the work falls on the author, and it's something that I think a lot of authors out there just don't really understand, that even if you are trade published, there's still only so much that your publisher is going to do for you. The vast majority of that is going to fall on your shoulders to market and promote and to brand build.
Yes, and I think it's a shock when you, a lot of the, because, you know, many of us grew up wanting to be, you know, Dean Koontz, Stephen King, you know, published by big houses, you know, internationally sold, and, you know, they show up to an event, they sit, and everybody lines up to talk to them. You know, we kind of had that as our vision of success, and nowadays, I think it's a shock for a lot of authors that, you're not going to do, there's a possibility that could be you, but you're going to have to do a lot of the legwork if you want to get there. Like you said, the book has to end up being a bestseller, and that means you really put in a lot of time and effort into marketing yourself and the book. And I think there's this, yes, I think you're right, this disillusionment of, oh my gosh, this is something I'm going to have to do. And especially because the majority of us authors tend to be extremely shy, introverted people.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not easy for us to get out there and to talk to people, to go to the book events and the arts and crafts fairs and the comic paloozas and be there at our table and trying to sell our book. It feels weird to us.
It's very, for me, it's very unnatural. And it's not that I don't like people. It's not that I don't like talking to people. I sit and chat with my friends all the time, and my husband's like, you never shut up. So it's not necessarily so much that I don't like being around people or don't like talking to people. I don't do well around people that I've never met or people that I've just met. So, and I think that's probably where a lot of authors are. We love to sit and talk about writing. We love to talk about our books. We love to talk about publishing. But it's just getting someone, to stop long enough and to show interest. The very first book event that I went to as a signing author was in March of last year. And we were kind of over to the side, almost in an alcove. And there was a lot of we were missing a lot of the foot traffic because of the way of the layout of the room. So, we had people that was, coming to, the table next to us and then kind of bypassing the last three tables to go over, to the next line. And me and the girl that was sharing my table, we got to the point where if someone so much as made eye contact with us, we were smiling and literally waving them over. Come talk to us. Come look and see what we've got. Take some swag. And you really have to put yourself out there almost to the point of getting up and walking around and shaking people's hands like a politician and handing out bookmarks and saying, hey, this is what I do. But it's very difficult for a lot of writers. It's the fear of the unknown, I've always had this fear of someone, taking my bookmark and throwing it back at me like, what are you doing?
Yes. It's a very uncomfortable position. We feel weird and awkward having to put ourselves out there. But one thing that I have found is that it does get easier. The first time that I would do it, it would be very, very hard. There were times that I would rather sit there in silence, and everybody was walking by and nobody was talking to me. But eventually you do get into that, like, okay, I need to do this. I paid for this table. I've got my book. I better get myself out there, right? And so I think it gets a little bit easier as time goes by, but it's still something that for many authors to get started is difficult, and to realize that you have to do it, that it's not going to be this like ideal situation where your publisher does everything and you just sit and, everybody comes to you. That's not going to happen, at least not right away.
Yeah.
Hopefully it happens to us, right, that we sell 1 million books and we're bestsellers and we're on every show. But, that is kind of a 1 in a million situation. And for most of us, it's really not even about that. I think that for really the genuine author, the real writer, it's more about just knowing that somebody read your words and liked them. That's it. That's what feeds you.
Absolutely.
It's not even the number of books you sold.
Yes, it's connecting with that one person that just loved it as much as you did.
I remember I had been to this one event, the Houston Authors Bash, the year before, and I decided to do it again the second year. And when I was there the second year, this lady came by and she's like, oh, I remember buying from you guys. What do you have new? And I remember thinking, oh, my God, how awesome is that, that she bought one of our books and now she wants to buy something new from us, And that was really uplifting because it was like she liked it, and she liked it well enough that she's going to buy a second one,
Yes.
And so that was one of the first times that I really realized that it was really about people that recognize you. Little by little, Inklings Publishing has become more recognized. Where people, I mentioned our name, people have heard of us. They recognize our logo, and that is really what it's about. I mean, we're very small. We've started, like I said, in 2013. So, I mean, last year we kind of had a little bit of a profit. We're beginning to turn a profit. But, before 2015, we were really kind of just on the bleeding out money side of the equation,
Yes.
But that's how it is when you're a small business. At first you've got to invest a lot of money and time and effort, and then eventually you begin to see a profit, And, hopefully someday Inklings might be one of the big five. That's the goal, that's the dream. But for now, we've got who we have, and we're working with them and building that relationship and kind of, starting to look for new books with new genres and expanding prudently, because we've seen several small presses that have gone under, and I think that a big part of that has been that they expand too fast. They just grab too many authors, and then you're not able to really build a business, because you're way too extended.
Absolutely. And I'd actually had this conversation with a couple of the authors that I've had on the podcast, discussing how much we would like to create our own publishing house, because for me, pretty much I am a one-stop shop with myself. Other than hiring out editors and proofreaders, I do the formatting, I do the graphic artwork, I format for Smashwords and Kindle and paperback. So I've kind of learned to do all of that, and it's something that I actually thoroughly enjoy doing. And as much as I would love to start my own publishing company, you have the back end of it, the actual business end, that you have to take on all the responsibility, and that includes all of the economic responsibility of either hiring someone to do all of the work, or you're having to spend thousands of hours doing it all yourself, trying to get these books out there. And it's like you said, a lot of the small presses, the problems that they've done is that they've taken on dozens of authors, and they've got all these books, and they're spending all this money to meet the deadlines, getting it edited and proofread and graphic artwork done. And they've spent all of this money, but the reality of the book publishing business these days is, thanks to Amazon, literally everyone and their brother is now a published author. So you have this, completely saturated market, and you've spent all of this money, and, there's only a lot of the authors go with publishers because they either don't know what they're doing, they don't have the marketing or the promoting know-how, or they don't have the money to hire someone that can do it. So they're really relying heavily on their publisher to do all the marketing and promoting for them. So you have these publishers, that have taken on all of these authors, and they're bleeding money out left and right, and there simply is not any profit to be made on the books, because you've got authors that literally don't know how to market or promote, or what they should be doing. So I've seen so many authors on my newsfeed that their publisher has went under in 2016. Mm-hmm. So it's very sad to see so many go under, but I'm like you, I really think it's because they're just overextending themselves.
Definitely. Because when we started, I was doing everything. I was doing the formatting, and I did get some cover designers, because I'm not that great at that side of the business. So that I always had somebody, and of course, my editor that did that so that we could make sure it was a good quality product. But, you know, I was doing pretty much almost all of it. Last year, we began working with a lady that does now our formatting, you know, because we've gotten new people. We have now expanded enough, and we're in a financial situation in which we can afford to do that, and it will allow me then to take on a few extra authors, you know. We've gotten some more personnel. I have Karina, who is now our vice president, and she's now helping us. So, but you have to plan very carefully, because if you take on too much too soon, it's going to hurt you. You know, it's going to hurt you. And one of the things I've seen is a lot of these smaller publishers, they'll cut some corners, you know, when they begin to feel too overwhelmed. And one of the corners they usually cut is in the editing, and that's like the worst place to cut. You know,
absolutely.
You need quality. You're not going to make a name for yourself if people pick up your book and there's just a ton of errors in it, you know. That's one of the most critical things. And so, you know, if you want to be a publisher and you want to start your own small press, I think people should. You know, I think we need more presses run by authors, because we understand what it's like to be an author, you know, and so we can be more really a more fair publisher to authors, because we are authors, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have to be very business savvy. You need to also be planning ahead and know that, you know your limitations. That's one of the things that I've had to balance out, okay? You know, what are my limitations? I want to do right for the authors I have. I don't want to add so many new people that I cannot really be there for them. So, you know, that was one of the lessons in 2016 for me is, you know, don't expand prudently. That was kind of the big aha. Expand prudently, you know. I've got some wonderful authors who are producing more books for us, and, you know, we're adding 2 new authors this year, and that's good. And, you know, we're looking ahead to who are we going to add in 2018. And so it's good to just grow slowly, naturally, you know, let things happen so that you're not forcing it and possibly end up, you know, leaving these poor authors also in the lurch, because now many authors are without a publisher, and they don't know what to do. What's the next step now for them, you know?
Absolutely. And I was with a hybrid press back up until I think it was June of last year. It's when they closed down, and I think the problem that they had is that they were just taking on way too many authors too quickly, and it was a hybrid model. They didn't have their staff that was doing the editing and the book design and the marketing and the promoting wasn't staff. They were independent contractors that were signed on with the publishing company. So I think that they were just taking on way too many authors, way too many books, way too quickly. And they were actually still taking submissions up until about 2 weeks before they announced that they were closing their doors. So
wow.
I think they were just biting off way more than they could chew. Like you said, they were just expanding way too quickly, and it left a lot of authors that had been with them from the beginning that were sitting around going, I've never not had a publisher. I've never been independently published. I don't have a clue what to do now. And there was some of them that were just so overwhelmed by what you had to do when you were independently published, and just they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to turn. They had no clue what to do with their books. You know, their books were pulled from all of these different retailers, and there were some of them that they literally had 6, 8 books that were now no longer up for sale. They had lost their graphic work. A lot of them had lost the edits, the final edits that had been done. So they were basically back to square one with absolutely nowhere to turn, and they're sitting there going, I don't know what to do because I've never had to be independently published. So it amazes me. I really think that if you're going to be an author, especially in this day and age, you really need to look into being independently published. Learn the ups and downs, even if you decide I don't want to do that. Know enough about the business so when you do sign a contract with a publisher, you know what you're getting into and you kind of know what to expect. Because again, this goes back to authors thinking that because they sign a book deal with this huge publisher that they don't have to do anything else, when that's just not the reality of it. And you do have authors that are sitting there, pulling their hair out, that are stressed out because they have all these deadlines to meet with their trade publisher, and they don't know what to do because they're supposed to be building a platform and they're supposed to be marketing and promoting, and they just don't have a clue how to go about doing it.
And that's where also you can connect to some local organizations. Here in Houston, we have a lot of incredible organizations that help authors. We have chapters of the Romance Writers of America. We have chapters of the Society for Children Writers and Illustrators. I always mess up their name. The Houston Writers Guild is a fantastic organization, and I know I'm slightly biased because I am serving on their board, but still, it's, you need to connect with some of these organizations because, you go to those meetings, you have the opportunity, like, for example, with the Guild, we have socials. So these are just evenings on Fridays, that you just gather together and you just chat with other authors. You get to hear their stories. You get to hear what's been going on with them. And that helps you to see, okay, maybe I should be careful with this or that, when you're hearing other people's stories. There's events that you can go to. The Guild's going to be having their April conference, which is the last weekend in April. Lots of presenters on a whole bunch of different topics. You can learn about the agents if you want to try for traditional publishing. It's important to go to these. Sometimes I have authors tell me, well, I've already been to every conference imaginable and I know everything there is to know. And that's true. Maybe you have heard everything that's being said, but refreshing yourself on it, kind of a refresher course is never a bad idea. And it's a good way to connect to other authors, hear what's happening in the industry, just to stay in touch because it's very fluid too. It's an industry that's in flux, and whereas not that long ago there were definite gatekeepers that were the agents, and there were the big publishers. And if you were going to be an author and be published, you had to go down this one very clearly defined and strict little path. And that's not the case anymore. It's like the floodgates are open. There's a whole vast array of opportunities, and there's also a lot of pitfalls. And so you have to be connected to your local organizations, national organizations of writers, to be informed, to see where's the industry going, what's the next big thing, and be careful. Is it really something worth investing, or is it going to be one of those fly-by-night things? So I think that's where this kind of like writing community, creating that and being a part of that is very important.
Yes, it's most definitely a very dynamic industry that's changing all the time. And a lot like I've always said, as a writer, there's always room for improvement. I don't care who you are. You can always improve on something. And learning how to market and promote in the publishing industry is the same way. I don't care how long you've been in the industry. It is so dynamic that you're going to constantly learn something new, and you really have to roll with the punches. And that's one thing. I guess my two pet peeves with authors is you have the new ones that don't want to listen to the people that have been in the industry for a while that you can actually learn from, and then the ones that have been in the industry forever that they think they know everything and they're not willing to learn something new. So you really have to walk that tightrope, to be willing to listen to someone. If someone says something that, is willing to tell me or teach me something that I didn't already know, I don't care if they picked up a pen yesterday and decided to be an author. If they know more than me and they can teach me something new, then it's well worth investing my time and energy, to listen to them and to take that knowledge and apply it in my own marketing and promoting. And I think you have some authors that are just, think that, well, it's this specific way and it's going to stay that specific way, and that's just not the way that things are in the publishing industry, at least not now. Now, before, when it was just trade publishing, it's like you said, it was this very narrow path. It was, it was very linear, and there was, definite stepping stones to get from point A to point B to point C. And now it's just not like that. It's, literally just, grid lines going everywhere. You can literally go in just so many different directions. And you have to be willing to, if something's not working, go back to the drawing board. You've got to be willing to try something new if what you're doing isn't working.
Yes, and I'll tell you, I have a lot more patience with like a new author that may think that already thinks they know everything and they're trying to do it on their own. I'm like, okay, when you need help, I'm here. But when it comes to like authors who have been successful, it doesn't negate that you have had success, that you try to learn more. And to me, it even makes you better because you're continuing to seek information because you're aware that this is a very dynamic industry. One of the things that the Guild does with its presenters is if you're a presenter, part of it is when you're not doing your session, you can go to all the other sessions. It's complimentary for you, the whole conference. And it's very sad to me when there's presenters who arrive right before their session and they leave right after their session and that's it, It's sad because I feel like here you are, you're a leader in the industry. You could be setting the example to other authors of, being a lifelong learner, So it's something that is very sad. But the fact that this is a very open industry and there's so much opportunity in it, it can be dangerous for people because they can make mistakes. But at the same time, it's wonderful just how much control you have. There was the time where you didn't get to decide what was on your cover. Mm-hmm. You were shown your cover and that's it, But now you get to opine, you get to help be a part of all of it, So it's a beautiful time, especially for authors who are willing to do the hard work and who are really entrepreneurial. Because if you have a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, the information on how to run this as a business, being able to differentiate between your art, when you're writing your books, that's art. When you're selling your books, that's a business. And if you can separate those two, and you can focus yourself when you're doing your business and run it as a business, I mean, really the sky is the limit. You can be as successful as you're willing to work towards, pretty much, in my book.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that everyone really, and you see it all the time on Facebook, being an author is a business. Well, and I think that's kind of, if you're going to be your own publishing company, then it's like you said, you really have to differentiate between being an author is the art part, but then when you turn around and start, being your own publisher with the marketing, the promoting, the formatting, the editing, the artwork, that is where the business side takes over. And if you're going to do it all, then you really have to learn. And like you said, it is a business. And for me personally, that's one of the huge pitfalls that I have is I love the art part of it. I love writing. I love doing the book teasers. I love doing the graphic artwork. I love, doing my blog and the podcast and everything. But when it comes to actually marketing and promoting, I suck so bad. So bad.
But no, because you're out there. I mean, you've got your blogs, you've got your podcasts. I mean, you are doing it, you know. So believe me, you are very further ahead than a lot of authors who don't even realize they need to be doing it, you know. And the thing about marketing and promoting is that it is very difficult to quantify what effect your blog is having on your book sales. You know, trying to figure that out or find a way to show proof that it is actually affecting your book sales, that's hard. You know, you don't, when you run a marketing, there's some sites that we will put our books on, you know, for a week or a month. It's very difficult to say that, yes, that money that we spent putting our book on that site did pay off in sales. It's almost impossible to quantify that. But we always think of it as, when you're doing marketing, when you're doing advertising, it's about exposure. You may not always see an immediate return, but there is a return on investment, because people have now seen your book. They have seen it on this site, and then they'll see it on another site. They may see you in person at some event. And so eventually they see it so many different places that it begins to click, like the lady that came up to us, and she was looking at our table throw, and she's like, I've seen y'all at a lot because I recognize that logo. And that's the moment where she bought, because, you know, she had seen it in different places, and so now, you know, meeting us there and talking, and she bought some books. So it all pays off. You know, so you don't have to worry too much about trying to quantify it. You know, let it happen more organically, if you will.
And I am so happy to hear you use that word, exposure. I'd actually gotten into a discussion on a Facebook post about whether or not blog tours, actually paying for a blog tour, whether or not it was a good idea. And I had made the comment that, you know, everyone thinks that you do a blog tour and that their end result, what they expect to see, is sales. And I'd made the comment that, you know, it really wasn't about sales so much as it was about exposure. And someone had said, well, you're in the minority because it's always going to be about sales. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense, because someone has to be exposed to you, you know, so many times before things start clicking. And it's like you said, you can't really quantify what is working and what's not, and whether or not, you know, spending this money or doing this or doing that is actually working, especially when you are doing multiple things at one time. So for me, I'm like, you know, I understand going into a blog tour that I'm probably not going to see sales immediately, but if I've, you know, got the same few readers that's going to all these different blogs that's hosting my book, maybe by the fifth or the sixth time that they see that same write-up, it's like you said, it's starting to click. Oh, this looks familiar. I remember this. I remember seeing this book cover. Let me read this blurb a little bit more carefully. And maybe, you know, once they've seen it a couple of times, it clicks with them that maybe I ought to go check that out. And I think people don't really realize that sales is a result of that exposure. And it's really about getting your name out there, and it goes back to doing the blog, doing the podcast, doing, you know, the Facebook posts. The more people see you, the more they're exposed to you, the more likely they are at some point in time that something is going to click, and they're going to remember seeing something with your name on it or your book title on it, and maybe that's the time that they finally decide, I'm going to take a chance and buy this book.
Yep. You know, in real estate, there's this like rule of thumb that you have to have about 8 contacts with a potential client before they're willing to go ahead and sign with you and let you work with them. And so, you know, in real estate, you'll do like an open house, and you'll have the people who visit it, and some of those are people who have no intention of actually buying anything. They were just, you know, out and about, and they thought it would be cool to stop in. But then there's the ones who are actually really looking, and a lot of times, I've seen realtors. They'll contact that list. They'll have three times that they try to contact, and then they'll drop. They'll just won't do anything more with it. But the ones that get the clients are the ones that keep on touching base at least 8 times, and then many times they do translate into buyers. And it's kind of the same thing with books. You've got to keep having that exposure out there. Your name has to be out there. Your books have to be out there, because you don't know how many times it's going to take for that person to decide to go ahead and buy. It's not necessarily on the first, second, or third. It could be up to 8 times before they do it. So it's very important when you're marketing not to give up, not to say, well, none of this works, so I'm not going to do anything else. You have to keep on. It's the consistent and being out there, because readers see all these. As a reader, you go to your sites, your favorite sites, where you go and look and see what books they're promoting. You've got your bloggers that you follow. So you may not necessarily buy the book that they're talking about that day. But if you see them then on another site that you also follow and it's the same book, it begins to click.
Absolutely. And I think for me, one of the things that I get frustrated the most with is, I've asked people, what's working for you? And I get the usual, post on Facebook frequently, do blog tours, do a newsletter, all these different things. I'm like, okay, I've been independently published for 12 years. Everything that you've told me to do, I have done numerous times over the last 12 years, and it's just not working for me. And everyone's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. And I'm like, well, can anyone think outside the box? Because I'm racking my brain here, and, all the things that, working wonders for other people is failing miserably for me. And it's just like everybody's like, well, I will, and I know most authors are like, well, then I'm just going to quit and I'm not going to do anything. And, I'm the type of person that I'm over here literally wanting to beat my head against my desk, but I'm Googling things, just racking my brain trying to come up with any little new thing or new spin or twist that I could put on this to keep going, because you just cannot give up, because you do not know at what point someone may suddenly decide, hey, this is a great author and I'm going to tell my book club about it. And then those people start talking about it on social media and with their groups of friends. So success could literally be the next book, or right around the corner, or your next interview, or your next blog tour. So you cannot give up at any point.
Mm-hmm. And I've had some people go, well, I'm not going to be doing this or that because I don't think they have that many followers. It doesn't matter how many followers someone has or doesn't have. The fact that you're being interviewed, or the fact that your book is being featured, that's what you want to talk about, and you don't know who is going to be following them, down the road. So I think it's very difficult to think outside the box, is hard, especially because, many of us have been trying the same thing, and it works sometimes quicker for some and not as quick for others. It's kind of difficult to say what is the public going to suddenly get really into, I don't know necessarily that people expected 50 Shades of Grey to be the success it is. I think that even she was probably surprised by how successful it was, because sometimes you just can't predict that. People are going to like what they're going to like, and it may catch fire, and it just goes, But we had a webinar recently with the Guild that with a marketing expert, and he was talking about some ideas that he tries with his clients to push it to different markets, and maybe markets that will buy in bulk, not so much the single reader market, but like markets that will buy multiple books. Of course, these are probably better for like nonfiction books, but if you think about who would want your book, who would want to read your book, who is the audience, you can begin to look at some of these like maybe non-retail necessarily markets to see if you can fit in some way. If your book can, I don't know, tie into schools somehow, or if your book can tie into a certain kind of business, you can offer them to have it. In romance and erotica, some of our books are on sale at a store called Smoochies, and we don't have huge orders from them, but our book is there, and there's sales, and so I don't think a lot of people think about in romance, going to some of these like sexy stuff stores and see if they want to carry your book, because people are going in there for sexy stuff. They may buy your book, So yes, thinking outside the box can be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Fern, I've really enjoyed our chat. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about or go over or say to anyone before we wrap everything up?
Well, I just want to mention that in March, during March and April, we will be having our open call for submissions for short stories for Eclectically Heroic. It's going to be Volume 5 of our Eclectic Writing Series that's published by Inklings Publishing. During that time, we'll have all of the Eclectic Writing Series anthologies for 99 cents on Kindle. So if people are interested in seeing what kinds of stories we're looking at, they can buy some, and you can kind of get an idea of what would pique our interest. But the theme is heroic, so and we want stories that have interesting twists to them that are not your run-of-the-mill superhero, although we don't mind superhero stories. But we do want something a little unique, something eclectic about it. So that's why we're doing the 99-cent thing, so that people can download the books and kind of get a flavor for them. But if any of the authors listening are interested, please check out the submission information on our website, and hopefully we'll get some submissions.
Awesome. Is there a specific word count that you're looking at?
Yes, probably no more than 5,000 would be good.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Fern. I have really enjoyed it, and I would love to have you back on the show if you ever decide you want to come back and join us again.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and you have a good night.
You too.
Huge thank you again to Fern Brady for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, this is Nicola Matthews saying peace, love, and books, y'all.